started with the smell. Not the usual scent of sweat and sneakers clinging to old gym mats, but something heavier, sour and wrong. A silence hung in the air as the students paused. It was January 11th, 2013. Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia. A girl pointed. Another looked away. And there, rolled deep inside a vertical gym mat, feet sticking out like the limbs of a discarded doll, was the body of Kendrick Johnson. Face down. No pulse. No sound. And no one saw it coming. The call came into 911 dispatch just after 10:30 a.m. A student had been found dead, inside a rolled-up wrestling mat in the school gymnasium. Paramedics arrived quickly. Police weren't far behind. The scene was strange. Still. Too quiet for a place usually filled with life. The gym had dozens of those mats, thick, cylindrical rolls taller than a person and weighing hundreds of pounds. They were stacked against the wall, upright. Used during off-seasons to save space. But no one expected to find a student inside one. And certainly not Kendrick Johnson. He was 17. A junior. A three-sport athlete. Soft-spoken but charismatic. Friends called him KJ. He ran track. Played football. Laughed with his whole body. He had dreams of going pro one day. Maybe college ball first. He lived with his parents, Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson, in a tight-knit household built on love, faith, and discipline. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't reckless. He had routines, friends, and a future. But now he was gone. Lying in the hollow center of a rolled mat, his arms pressed tightly against his body. His head facing down. Shoes trapped beneath him. It didn't look like an accident. But that's exactly what authorities would soon call it. At first, there was chaos. School officials evacuated the gym. Police photographed the scene. The Johnson family was notified. But in the hours and days that followed, things moved fast. Too fast. The crime scene wasn't sealed off properly. Some students were never interviewed. Surveillance footage was missing, or appeared tampered with. No autopsy was performed at the scene. And by the end of that same week, Lowndes County Sheriff Chris Prine held a press conference. Kendrick's death, he said, appeared to be a tragic accident. They believed KJ had fallen headfirst into the mat while reaching for a shoe. Got stuck. Couldn't breathe. And died trying to get out. It made no sense. Kendrick's family didn't believe it. Neither did much of the community. The official explanation raised more questions than answers. Why would KJ dive headfirst into a mat over 6 feet tall, knowing others were nearby? How could a healthy, athletic teenager get trapped in a hole just 14 inches wide? Why was there blood on his face, his neck swollen, his organs missing? And most of all, why were authorities so quick to close the case? The Johnsons demanded a second autopsy. And what they found changed everything. When the body was exhumed, the private pathologist made a chilling discovery. Kendrick's internal organs were gone. In their place, newspaper. Stuffed into his chest cavity like packing material. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation claimed the organs had been destroyed due to natural processes during the first autopsy. The funeral home said they'd received the body that way. No clear chain of custody. No straight answers. But the second autopsy told a different story. It revealed blunt force trauma to the neck. Cause of death, non-accidental, inflicted injury. The Johnson family, heartbroken but resolute, took their fight public. They didn't just want answers, they demanded them. They held press conferences, rallies, protests. They called for the case to be reopened. To be investigated not as an accident, but as a homicide. They believed their son had been murdered. And someone was covering it up. The theory began to circulate, that KJ had gotten into a fight with another student, or students, and had been killed. That school officials, or law enforcement, or someone in power, had helped sweep the truth under the rug to protect the family. A name. A reputation. Rumors turned to headlines. And the case exploded nationally. Journalists descended on Valdosta. Civil rights activists spoke out. Al Sharpton joined the cause. Benjamin Crump, famed for his work in other high-profile racial justice cases, got involved. People asked, was this another example of injustice in the Deep South? Of a black teenager's life being devalued, then quietly erased? The questions were raw. Real. The surveillance footage was released, but it was incomplete.
Reached out to both the school that owns the cameras that recorded it, and then the sheriff's office, which had a copy of it, which supplied it to us. I want to read you the statements. First, from the school district, an attorney for Lowndes County Schools says simply, what we produced to the sheriff is a raw feed with no edits. And then from the attorney for the sheriff's office, my client has confirmed that the video was not altered or edited by anyone within the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office. They both maintain that what we see is exactly what was recorded.
What about the corner where the gym mats are, or where Kendrick's body was ultimately found? I mean, that seems to be the key place. We've known there was a camera there. You saw the video from that camera today. What did you see?
Over an hour of footage was missing. And what remained only deepened suspicion. Kendrick could be seen walking into the gym. Alone. But what happened after that was gone. In the years that followed, lawsuits would fly in every direction. The Johnsons filed a wrongful death suit. Named nearly 36 defendants. From school administrators to classmates to the FBI. Accusations of evidence tampering, obstruction, and silence. They believed 2 white students, former classmates of Kendrick's, were involved in his death. Sons of an FBI agent. That the investigation had been derailed from within. The accused denied everything. Investigators stood by their conclusion. The sheriff's office refused to budge. But the fire didn't die. And the Johnsons refused to let their son become just another case gone cold. There are some deaths that raise questions. And then there are those that seem to choke on the silence left behind. Kendrick Johnson was gone. His body rolled in a mat. His organs missing. His parents screaming into a void where answers should have been. And just when it felt like the truth might surface, something else vanished too. The footage. In the age of surveillance, it's rare for a person to disappear without a trace. Especially in a high school with over 30 security cameras mounted across campus. But when investigators finally released footage showing Kendrick's final moments, what they offered was incomplete. From the moment KJ entered the gym, there were gaps. Missing minutes. Frozen frames. Timestamps that jumped or didn't align. In one shot, Kendrick walks toward the mats. Then the screen glitches. And he's gone. Lowndes High School claimed the video system was outdated. That it recorded different sections of the school on separate loops. That nothing was intentionally deleted. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation supported that explanation. But private analysts brought in by the Johnson family disagreed. They said hours of footage were gone. That the timing was too precise. That key movements, those that might show someone else entering the gym, were missing entirely. Was it negligence? Or something more deliberate? Even today, no one can explain why so many minutes of footage, on the day Kendrick died, simply disappeared. The public's outrage grew louder. What began as a local tragedy was now a national scandal. News outlets picked up the case. Twitter hashtags surged. Candlelight vigils and marches took over downtown Valdosta. In April 2013, just months after Kendrick's death, the Justice Department announced it was reviewing the case. By 2014, the FBI officially opened a federal investigation. The Johnsons hoped this would finally be the moment where justice would turn in their favor. That new eyes, unbiased and unafraid, would unravel the tangled web of silence and suspicion. But the deeper they looked, the more divided things became. The Johnsons insisted this was a cover-up. They filed a $100 million civil suit against 38 defendants, claiming a conspiracy to protect those responsible for their son's death. They named 2 students specifically, Brian and Brandon Bell. Both boys were white. Both had once been friends, or at least teammates, with Kendrick. And both were sons of a former FBI agent. The Johnsons believed one of the brothers had gotten into a fight with Kendrick over a girl. That the fight turned fatal. That the school, and possibly law enforcement, worked to bury the truth to protect the Bell family. But the accusations were hard to prove. The Bell family pushed back, hard. They denied everything. In 2016, after nearly 3 years of investigation, the U.S. Department of Justice closed the federal case. No charges were filed. In a lengthy statement, prosecutors said there was insufficient evidence to support federal criminal charges. They had reviewed surveillance footage, cell phone records, forensic evidence, and hundreds of interviews, and found no proof of foul play. The Johnson family was devastated. But they refused to accept it. Because for them, Kendrick's death had never felt like an accident. And the pain of that day still lived in every unanswered question, every quiet hallway, every sealed record they were told they couldn't see. By 2018, the Johnsons had exhumed Kendrick's body for the third time. A third autopsy was performed. The results echoed the second, death by blunt force trauma, possibly caused by a 30-pound dumbbell found near the scene. Once again, it clashed with the official ruling of positional asphyxia, that Kendrick suffocated after getting stuck upside down while reaching for a shoe. The theory had always seemed implausible. Kendrick's shoulders were broader than the opening of the mat. And he had no defensive wounds. No bruises on his hands. If he had struggled, the mat would have shown signs. It didn't. If he had cried out, someone might have heard. No one did. What was left was silence. And a family still trying to scream through it. In 2021, the case was briefly reopened. A new sheriff, Ashley Polk, agreed to take a second look after receiving 17 boxes of federal documents that had never been reviewed locally. The Johnsons clung to hope once again. But that hope, like every lead before it, slowly faded. After a year of review, Polk announced that the findings had changed nothing. There would be no arrests. No indictment. No new conclusions. He said plainly, there is nothing to substantiate a homicide. But the Johnsons still believe. They believe because they knew their son. They believe because the evidence, what little there was, never told a clear story. Only fragments. Missing time. Sanitized answers. They believe because justice shouldn't look like a 17-year-old boy stuffed inside a gym mat with newspaper in his chest and no one held accountable. They believe because to stop believing would be to let him be forgotten. And that, more than anything, is what they refuse to allow. Time moved forward, but for the Johnson family, grief remained still. Kendrick Johnson's death had been ruled an accident. His organs discarded. His name debated, doubted, dissected. But his parents never stopped speaking his truth. Because when justice never comes, remembrance becomes resistance. The years passed. New tragedies emerged in the headlines. New names. New marches. New hashtags. But in Valdosta, Georgia, Kendrick Johnson's name never really faded. It haunted hallways. It echoed in school gyms. It pressed against the town's quiet charm like a bruise just under the surface. His face remained printed on protest posters, on t-shirts, on murals painted by hands that refused to forget. Kendrick had become more than a student, more than a son. He had become a symbol. For Jacqueline and Kenneth Johnson, the fight for answers became their full-time reality. They filed lawsuits. Lost. Appealed. Filed again. They spoke to cameras, not because they wanted to, but because silence was the only thing more unbearable than grief. They showed photos. Graphic ones. Images most families would never want the public to see. Because they believed the truth was being buried deeper than their son ever was. They marched. Held rallies. Sat in courtrooms where nothing changed. And when the third autopsy said blunt force trauma, they held onto it like a lifeline, proof that their son had not simply fallen into a mat and died without sound. That he mattered. But justice never came. No arrests. No indictments. No formal charges. Just reports. Press releases. Closed files. In 2022, after years of independent reviews and mounting public pressure, the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office released an internal report reconfirming their original findings. Kendrick Johnson, they said, died trying to retrieve a shoe from the center of a mat. There was no evidence of foul play. No DNA pointing to others. No signs of a struggle. They dismissed the second and third autopsy findings. They closed the case again. And this time, permanently. To the system, Kendrick Johnson's death was a closed chapter. To his family, it was still an open wound. The Kendrick Johnson case became one of the most polarizing unsolved deaths in modern true crime history. And not just because of the mystery, but because of what it reflected. The limits of trust. The cost of disbelief. The cracks in systems built to protect. It raised uncomfortable questions. About how quickly we label a death accidental. About how trauma is explained away. About what justice looks like when the victim is a young black teenager in a southern town where silence speaks louder than evidence. In time, Kendrick's story inspired more than protests. It changed policies. National organizations pushed for reforms in how school deaths are investigated. Families of other suspicious deaths, especially involving youth of color, began to speak louder, citing Kendrick's case as proof that sometimes, questions must be shouted before they're heard. It became a lesson. A warning. A name that wouldn't stay buried. Today, Kendrick's gym mat lies somewhere forgotten. But his story doesn't. Each year, on the anniversary of his death, his parents gather at the spot where he was found. Sometimes alone. Sometimes joined by supporters, activists, or quiet strangers who were moved by his story. They light candles. Hold signs. Speak his name. Kendrick Johnson. A name that once filled the air in locker rooms and track meets. Now spoken in courtroom halls and protest chants. Not because justice was done, but because silence, unbroken, is complicity.